from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, offer no resistance to one who is evil. When someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other one as well. If anyone wants to go along with you over your tunic, hand over your cloak as well. Should anyone press you into service for 1 mile, go for 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn your back on the one who wants to borrow. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor, and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your heavenly Father. He makes his sun rise on the bad and the good, and causes rain to fall on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what recompense will you have? Do not the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brothers or sisters only, what is unusual about that? Do not the pagans do the same? So be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect. My sisters and brothers, the gospel of the Lord.
Thanks to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So I can feel when you hear that gospel. Do we sometimes think, now, come on, Jesus, you didn't exactly mean that, did you? Love your enemies, bless your persecutors, to go the extra mile for people who wouldn't do it for you. Hey, that sounds like a real idealistic sermon. It's part of the Sermon on the Mount. But let's get real. And I guess we might ask, do we really believe what he said? And him who said it? If I were to ask for a show of hands, and I won't, how many people here might be holding a grudge, little one, big one, against somebody? How many people here might be having resentment that's been stewing within you for a period of time, maybe even going back years? How many people here might want to get back at somebody because of what they did to you? We all understand those emotions, but not God's belief. There's a fellow I know, his name is Mark. Probably talked about him here a year or two ago anyway. But I think his story bears repeating. Mark graduated from college, doing very well in his mid-20s, very athletic, active a lot. And he was out one night with his best friend who was driving the car. And this has been a few years, so I can't remember all the details, but I do know his best friend driving the car was very careless. It was a serious accident. His best friend, minor injuries. Mark ended up a paraplegic. Not able to walk ever since then. And I got to know him through mutual friends. Talked to him several times. This was a few years after this happened. And he was reflecting back on it. And he said, understandably, he had a lot of resentment toward his friend, his carelessness. He was also upset with himself that he even got in the car with him. And there was a lot of self-pity going on. He didn't understand it. He was a guy in the prime of life, was 20, no longer able to walk. Having to go through over a year of therapy, pain. But he said what really bothered him most was that his friend, best friend, never came to see him, never called, never sent even a little note, never even run through somebody else to say, hey, said in his young adult years, hey, who needs God? You got everything else, everything going for you. He kind of put God in the back burner. It's not like he didn't believe in God. He just didn't, it just wasn't much of a conscious part of his life. And so even after this, he was pretty resentful, like, God, where are you in all of this? How come this happens to me? He said he didn't believe God caused it, but part of it was, but God could have prevented it. So all that's going on. And this young woman, with the example of goodness and faith, touches Mark deeply. As he said, he began to take another look at his Catholic Christianity. He began to take another look at Jesus especially, to see if there was something there. As he shared, more with hindsight, he said, yeah, he was physically disabled, but what he came to realize, he was more spiritually disabled, emotionally disabled. And came to realize that, not initially, but over time, especially when he compared himself to this beautiful woman who had a deep faith. And yeah, she had physical health and all of that, but still, that she was willing to reach out to him and care for him and listen to him and encourage him. Why? Because she believed in Jesus. And because somehow the Spirit of Jesus touched and filled her life, and she wanted to make a difference in the lives of others, including Mark. And so he began to read more about Jesus. And of course, he had a lot of time on his hands that first year or two, and he read the New Testament. And of course, the first book in the New Testament, hopefully as Catholic Christians we know, is, at least a few know it. This is a Baptist crowd, you all shouted it out. But hey, here, the most important thing is probably to live it, obviously. But anyway, Matthew, which is the gospel we read from today. We're reading from the disciple in the church here. And he particularly got into the Sermon on the Mount, which we've been reading for several weeks now. Begins with the Beatitudes and goes into some rather challenging statements. Matthew chapter 5 through chapter 7. Sometime sit down and read it. There's a lot there. Matthew probably made a compilation of a number of different sermons that Jesus gave on that mountain for people to listen to and be transformed by, challenging statements. And so he read it. And basically, I remember we had a great conversation one time at his mutual friend's house about forgiveness. Because he talked about how he struggled with that for a long time, and especially felt there was no need to forgive his friend, because his friend never came and asked for forgiveness. And so that was that. Even though Mark was carrying a lot of toxic resentment in his own life. But he said, when he read the scriptures and saw clearly Jesus saying, hey, forgive. You know, love even your enemy. And at that point, kind of like his best friend that was no longer around, felt like an enemy. But could he love him? And then he even came to understand, as he was reading, and we talked further, and we need to understand this too in our own lives, that the biblical word for love, agape, doesn't necessarily mean, like we can tend to think, oh, love means you have a wonderful feeling for something. Well, think about Jesus, and Mark did. This challenged him even more, not only the Sermon on the Mount, but Jesus walked the talk, didn't he? Jesus, who spoke about love your enemies, bless your persecutors, within a couple of years was doing exactly that. To the people who were taking him to crucifixion, to the people who've been plotting against him in the whole time of his public ministry, to the people who spat on him, to his best friends who abandoned him in his time of need. Jesus forgave them all from the cross. And again, his love for them, I'm sure going to the cross wasn't, oh, I just have such warm, wonderful feelings for all these people. I can hardly wait to go to the cross and be crucified. No. He didn't have warm, wonderful feelings. Certainly. The heart of love is a decision. The heart of love is a commitment of the will. The heart of greater love and understanding from a biblical point of view is even when you don't feel it, you give of yourself anyway. Even when it doesn't come natural, you pray for supernatural grace to help you to forgive, to love, to go the extra mile. Especially when you don't feel it, in a sense, that's a greater love. That's the kind of love Jesus had, and Mark was coming to realize, hey, he didn't have to have could he, with his will, pray for him? And even as we talked, he said, he sorted that out, because at first prayed for him. But then he realized that's exactly what he needed to do. Because again, this woman friend that reached out to him, and they had these great conversations, helped him to realize this friend of his needed to be prayed for. The very fact that he never came around, hey, Mark didn't know why. But probably there was something going on inside of him, in his mind, in his heart, whether fear, embarrassment, anxiety, guilt, or maybe indifference, maybe not caring enough. Whatever it was, there was something empty, something amiss in this friend of his. He didn't know what it was, but he began to pray for his friend. Instead of just have hostile, negative feelings for people and hoping something bad would happen to him. He began to pray for his friend, and also, as he said, pray for himself, that he'd be able to take more loving attitude. And take and go that extra step. And so, Mark again realized, he said, what came to mind for him, and this is important for all of us, is just holding on to his not holding on to the grudge. It wasn't affecting his friend at all, it was affecting Mark terribly. Yeah, spiritually, emotionally, Satan. So finally, not only following as Jesus, being inspired by his words and his powerful example, and being open to his spirit to help him to go forward. And he began to realize, yeah, he no longer had his physical legs, but the spirituality he was now growing into was even more powerful, could make him even more vital than it did. Because he gave roots to a lot of people from a wheelchair. And so, talking to him about that, he went on then to say that eventually, it took a couple of years, eventually his friend got in touch with him.